The claiming trials were where you went when your own kind had given up on you. And as Narissa stood among the desperate Omegas who had been discarded, abandoned, or broken beyond repair, she knew she belonged here more than any of them. Because Narissa Vane was hollowed. Her wolf had died inside her 3 years ago, or so everyone believed. The beast that should have lived beneath her skin, the spirit that made her wolf kind, was gone. She was an empty vessel, an abomination. Neither fully human nor truly wolf. The other Omegas whispered prayers to ward off her bad luck. Even here, among the unwanted, she was the one they pitied most. Then the Alpha King arrived. Theron Voss. Beautiful as a blade, powerful as a storm. And cursed beyond salvation. Every woman he'd ever courted had fled. Every Omega who'd agreed to bond with him had watched her wolf begin to wither within weeks, had felt death creeping through her veins. 3 had nearly died before breaking the courtship. Now no woman in the 5 kingdoms would have him. He walked past nobility and beauty without a glance. He stopped directly in front of Narissa. "This one," he said. The hall erupted. Why would a king who killed every Omega he touched choose the one who was already dead inside? Narissa didn't understand either. Not until he made his terms clear. He would marry her, protect her, give her everything she needed. But he would never love her, never truly touch her, and never let her close enough to matter. Neither of them understood how impossible those vows would become. The Great Hall of Valdrin had been built for coronations and treaties, for the making of kings and the forging of alliances. Tonight, it held the claiming trials. This was where wolves came when every other path had closed, when they were too old for a first bond, too damaged by circumstance, too stained by scandal to find a proper mate. Unbonded wolves disrupted pack hierarchies. They made others uncomfortable. They reminded everyone that the bond between wolf and soul was fragile, that it could break, and that even fate could fail. Hence, the trials. The alphas who attended these gatherings were not seeking true mates. They sought second wives to manage households, mistresses to warm beds, nursemaids for motherless children. Useful bodies with useful wolves, nothing more. The Omegas had been arranged on a raised platform, lit by flickering torches that cast shadows across their faces. The trial master's voice echoed through the vaulted chamber, reciting bloodlines and basic qualities as if he were cataloging livestock. Daughter of the Thornwood Pack, 28 years, previously bonded, widowed. A woman with hollow eyes stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she curtsied. The crowd murmured. Widows were common here. The war against the Southern Territories had created thousands of them. Daughter of the Ashfall Pack, 31 years, unbonded, skilled in household management. Another woman. Her face bore the careful blankness of someone who had learned to expect nothing. She'd been passed over too many times. You could see it in the slope of her shoulders. Daughter of the Greymore Pack, 24 years, scarred in the border raids. No children. This one held her chin high, defiant despite the mottled burns that crawled up her neck and across her jaw. She met the crowd's stares without flinching. Narissa admired her for that. Then the trial master hesitated. He glanced down at his parchment, then at the final figure in the line, then back at the parchment as if hoping the words had changed. Formerly of the Vane household, he said, his voice dropping. 23 years. Hollowed. The whispers started immediately. Hollowed? They allow hollowed wolves in the trials now? Her wolf died inside her. She's an empty shell. Bad luck to even look at her. Narissa stood apart from the others, her hands clasped before her, her gaze fixed on the stone floor. She wore a simple gray dress, nothing that might draw attention. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, partially obscuring her face. Not because she was hiding anything, simply because she had stopped caring if anyone saw her at all. She could feel their stares like physical weight. the disgust, the pity, the fear that her condition might somehow be contagious, as if hollowing could spread through eye contact alone. It couldn't. Narissa knew that better than anyone. At the edge of the platform, barely visible in the shadows, stood her stepmother, Odessa Vane. The woman who had raised her since she was 7. The woman who had destroyed her. Odessa's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes gleamed with satisfaction. This was exactly what she wanted. Narissa humiliated. Narissa desperate. Narissa forced to beg for scraps from alphas who would never want her, because no one wanted a hollowed Omega. The trial master had moved on, accepting bids for the widow when the great doors exploded open. Every conversation died. Every head turned. An alpha presence rolled through the entrance like a winter storm, like frost cracking across a frozen lake. This wasn't ordinary dominance. This was ancient power, the kind that came from bloodlines so pure they were more myth than wolf. Narissa felt it even through her emptiness, even without a wolf to respond. Her human instincts screamed at her to kneel, to run, to hide. "The Alpha King!" someone gasped. "Gods above, what is he doing here?" Theron Voss walked into the hall as if he owned it, which, Narissa supposed, he did. He owned everything within 1,000 miles. He owned the very air they breathed. He was tall, impossibly tall, with hair the color of winter wheat and eyes like pale amber, wolf gold and piercing. Cold eyes, empty eyes, the kind of eyes that had seen too much death and stopped caring. At 30 years old, he looked like a man who had lived several lifetimes of pain. Rumors said he was beautiful, that Omega ladies wrote terrible poetry about his jawline, that princesses from distant kingdoms invented diplomatic crises just to visit his court. But beautiful seemed inadequate. Beautiful was too warm a word for this man carved from frost and shadow. Several nobles stepped backward as he passed. A wise decision, because Theron Voss was cursed, and everyone knew it. The withering. That's what they called it. Any Omega who bonded with him began to die. Her wolf would weaken first, growing distant and faint. Then her body would follow, strength fading, color draining, life seeping away like water through cracked stone. 3 Omegas had nearly died during courtship alone, before any bond was formalized. They'd broken their engagements and fled, choosing disgrace over death. Now no Omega would have him. Not for any price, not for any title. The Alpha King of Valdrin could have offered the moon itself, and still, every woman would refuse. So why was he here? At a trial for the broken and discarded? Theron stopped in the center of the hall. His gaze swept the platform, passing over each Omega in turn. His expression revealed nothing. "Continue," he said. The trial master nearly choked. "Your Majesty, we are honored by your presence. If you would prefer a private viewing, we could arrange." "Continue." The word was quiet, but it carried the weight of a command. No one in the hall dared to disobey. Theron began walking toward the platform. The crowd parted before him like water before a blade. Narissa heard his footsteps approaching, measured and deliberate. He stopped at the widow first. A long pause. She trembled under his attention, but didn't run. Brave woman. Foolish, but brave. The footsteps moved on. He paused at the scarred Omega next. Longer this time. Narissa could see the woman's hands shaking, but she met his gaze directly. Theron tilted his head slightly, considering. Then he moved on. The footsteps stopped directly in front of Narissa. She didn't look up. She kept her gaze fixed on the stones beneath her feet, counting the cracks between them. His boots were fine leather, polished to a gleam despite the winter mud outside. Expensive boots. King's boots. The silence stretched. No one in the hall breathed. She could feel him looking at her, studying her the way one might study a puzzle or a wound. What did he see? A hollowed Omega in a gray dress. An empty shell with no wolf to bond, no spirit to claim. Worthless by every measure that mattered. So why wasn't he moving on? This one, Theron said. The words cut through the silence like a blade through silk. Cold. Final. Absolutely certain. Chaos erupted. Narissa's head snapped up, her gaze meeting his for the first time. Wolf gold against gray. Frost against emptiness. Something passed between them, some flicker of recognition that she couldn't name. Why me? She wanted to ask. Why the one Omega who has nothing left to give? But she knew better than to question an Alpha King in public. Theron turned to the trial master, who stood gaping like a fish pulled from water. Prepare the contracts, the king said. I will take her tonight. From the shadows at the edge of the platform, Narissa heard her stepmother's sharp intake of breath. Shock. Fury. Something that might have been fear. For the first time in 3 years, something stirred in the hollow space where Narissa's wolf had once lived. Something that felt dangerously like hope. She crushed it immediately. Hope was for fools. Hope was what got wolves killed. But as the king's guard stepped forward to escort her from the platform, Narissa couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed. She didn't understand why he'd chosen her. She didn't understand what he wanted. And as she glanced back at Odessa's pale, furious face, she realized something that made her blood run cold. Neither did her stepmother. Through the frost-covered window of the carriage, Narissa watched the lights of the claiming hall fade into darkness. The vehicle moved swiftly through the empty streets, its wheels nearly silent on the frozen cobblestones. The Alpha King sat across from her, his long legs taking up most of the space between them. He hadn't spoken since claiming her. Hadn't even looked at her. His attention seemed fixed on something beyond the window, some distant point that only he could see. Narissa used the silence to study him. He was older than she'd expected. Not old exactly, but worn in ways that had nothing to do with age. Lines bracketed his mouth, faint but visible. Shadows lived beneath his eyes. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, but there was a tension in it, a constant clenching that suggested pain held just barely in check. The curse, she thought. It's eating him from the inside. The rumors said his touch brought death to Omegas. But looking at him now, Narissa wondered if the curse worked both ways. If perhaps he was dying too, slowly, with each Omega who fled from him. The carriage hit a rough patch of road and Narissa grabbed the edge of her seat to steady herself. The movement drew his attention. Those honey-colored eyes shifted toward her, and she felt the weight of his regard like a physical pressure. "You're not afraid," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was low and rich, the kind of voice that could command armies or whisper secrets in the dark. But there was something hollow in it too. Something missing. "Should I be?" Narissa asked. "Every other woman who sat where you're sitting fled before we reached the castle gates. They had wolves to protect. I don't." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps. Or curiosity. Then it was gone, replaced by that same glacial emptiness. "You know about my condition," he said. "Everyone knows about your condition, Your Majesty. And you know about yours. I was there when it happened." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I'm aware of what I am." Theron studied her for a long moment. The carriage passed beneath a street lamp, and the light caught his eyes, making them glow like molten gold. "Then you understand why I chose you." Narissa's breath caught. "Because I'm already dead inside. Because you cannot wither if there's nothing left to die." He said it plainly, without cruelty, as if stating a simple fact. Water is wet. Fire burns. A hollowed Omega cannot be killed by a curse that attacks the wolf. It made sense. Horrible, logical, perfectly rational sense. "So I'm immune," Narissa said slowly. "That's the theory." "And if the theory is wrong?" Then you'll die like the others almost did. He held her gaze without flinching. I won't lie to you about the risks. I'm done with lies. If you want to run, I'll stop the carriage right now. I won't force you. Narissa considered it. She could run. She could disappear into the frozen night, make her way to some distant town where no one knew her name. She could spend the rest of her life scrubbing floors and begging for scraps, hollow and alone and free. Or she could stay. She thought of Odessa's satisfied smile whenever Narissa flinched. She thought of her stepsister Marceline wearing their mother's jewels, living in their mother's rooms, being called by their mother's title while Narissa slept in the servants' quarters. She thought of 3 years of humiliation. 3 years of being called an abomination to her face. 3 years of wishing she had died when her wolf did. The Alpha King of Valdrin was cursed. He was cold. He was probably dangerous. But he was also offering her something no one else ever had. A way out. I'll stay, she said. If Theron was surprised, he didn't show it. He simply nodded once, then returned his attention to the window. The castle appeared 20 minutes later, rising from the frozen landscape like something out of a nightmare. It was vast and dark, all sharp angles and towering spires. No lights burned in the windows. No banners flew from the ramparts. It looked abandoned. It looked like a tomb. Home, Narissa thought, and almost laughed at the absurdity. A footman opened the carriage door and she stepped out into the bitter cold, her breath misted in the air. Frost crackled beneath her thin shoes. Theron appeared beside her, and she felt the temperature drop even further. It wasn't just the winter air. It was him. Cold radiated from his body like heat from a fire, but in reverse, as if he'd swallowed winter itself, and it was slowly freezing him from the inside out. This way, he said. Narissa followed him through massive iron doors and into an entrance hall the size of her stepmother's entire manor. The floors were dark stone. The walls were bare. No tapestries, no paintings, no signs that anyone actually lived here. Your staff, she asked as they climbed a sweeping staircase. Where are they? I dismissed most of them years ago. Why? Because I got tired of watching them flinch whenever I walked into a room. The words hit her harder than they should have. She knew what it felt like to be flinched away from, to be treated like a disease instead of a person. They stopped before a heavy wooden door. Theron pushed it open to reveal a study lined with books and maps, a fire burning low in the hearth despite the chill outside. This room, unlike the rest of the castle, felt almost warm, almost lived in. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. Narissa sat. Theron remained standing, his back to the flames, his face half-shadowed. The firelight caught the sharp edges of his cheekbones and made his eyes glow like burnished copper. The wedding will take place in 3 days, he said. The terms are simple. You will be my wife, my queen. You will attend public functions at my side when necessary, no more than a few times a year. You will give me an heir to secure the succession. He paused, and something in his expression shifted, a crack in the ice. Beyond that, we will not share a life. We will not share a bed except when necessary for conception. We will not pretend this is anything other than what it is, a contract, a transaction. I need an heir. You need protection. That's all this is. Narissa listened without interrupting. Each word landed like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples she couldn't quite read. You won't love me, she said finally. That's what you're saying. I can't love you. His voice hardened. I won't. Loving me is what triggers the curse. Every Omega who began to develop feelings for me started to wither faster. So we will keep this arrangement purely practical. No affection. No attachment. No hope for anything more. He said it like he was issuing a death sentence, like he was warning her away from a cliff edge. Narissa should have felt relieved. A loveless marriage meant safety. It meant clear boundaries. It meant she would never have to worry about her heart being broken by someone who could never return her feelings. Instead, she felt something unexpected stir in her chest, something that might have been pity or recognition. He's as alone as I am, she realized. Maybe more. I accept your terms, she said quietly. They're more than generous. Theron's brow furrowed. Generous? You're offering me safety, protection, a title, a home. I haven't had any of those things in 3 years. She met his gaze steadily. Cold indifference is better than what I'm leaving behind. So yes, Your Majesty, I accept. For a long moment he simply stared at her. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. And something passed between them. Some understanding that neither of them could name. Then Theron extended his hand. Then we have a bargain, he said. Narissa reached out and took it. The moment their fingers touched, she gasped. His hand was ice. Not cold, not cool, but ice. As if he'd been holding snow for hours, as if winter ran through his veins instead of blood. But it was more than the temperature. It was something else. Some current that passed between them. Some jolt of recognition that made her hollow chest ache. Theron's eyes widened slightly. He felt it too. Whatever it was. He dropped her hand quickly, stepping back. Your chambers have been prepared in the East Wing, he said, his voice carefully controlled. The servants will attend you in the morning. And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that echoed in the sudden silence. Narissa sat alone by the fire, staring at her palm. It still tingled where he'd touched her. Cold over cruelty, she told herself. That's all this is. But as she pressed her hand against her chest, feeling a strange new flutter beneath her ribs, she wasn't entirely sure that was true. The morning arrived gray and bitter, frost creeping up the windows like fingers trying to break in. Narissa woke in a bed larger than any she'd ever slept in, surrounded by linens softer than anything she'd touched in years. For a moment she lay still, disoriented. The ceiling above her was carved stone, not the cracked plaster of the servants' quarters. The air smelled of cedar and something else, something glacial and sharp that she was beginning to associate with him. Then she remembered. The claiming trial, the cursed king, the bargain. She was going to be queen. The thought was absurd enough to make her laugh. Narissa Vane, the hollowed Omega, the family disgrace, was going to marry the most powerful alpha in the 5 kingdoms. Odessa would be apoplectic. Marceline would probably faint from rage. For the first time in 3 years, Narissa almost smiled. The smile faded when a knock came at her door and a small procession of servants entered, led by an elderly woman with kind eyes and hands gnarled by age. Your Majesty, the woman said, curtsying. I am Viveka. I'll be attending you during your time here. Narissa blinked. I'm not queen yet. You will be in 3 days. Best to practice now. Viveka's eyes crinkled with something that might have been warmth. The king has requested your presence in the council chamber after breakfast. We should prepare you. The preparation took longer than Narissa expected. They bathed her in water scented with night-blooming jasmine. They dressed her in a gown of deep blue velvet, finer than anything she'd worn since her mother died. They brushed her dark hair until it gleamed, pinning it back from her face with silver combs. When Narissa looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like nobility. She looked like she belonged here. The lie of it sat heavy in her stomach. The council chamber was even more imposing than the study. A long table dominated the space, surrounded by high-backed chairs. Windows lined one wall, letting in the pale morning light. At the head of the table sat Theron, flanked by 2 advisors who eyed Narissa with poorly concealed suspicion. And at the far end of the table, her face a mask of pleasant curiosity, sat Odessa Vane. Narissa stopped cold. "Ah, there she is." Odessa's voice was honey poured over broken glass. "My stepdaughter, looking so much better than when I last saw her." The advisors glanced between them, clearly sensing undercurrents they didn't understand. Theron's expression remained impassive, but his golden gaze sharpened. "Lady Vane is here as a witness to the contract," he said. "As the head of your former household, her signature is required." "Of course." Narissa's hands clenched beneath the folds of her gown. Even now, even in the Alpha King's own castle, she couldn't escape her stepmother's shadow. "Please sit," Theron said, gesturing to the chair beside him. Narissa sat. The movement brought her close enough to feel the chill radiating from his body, that unnatural frost that seemed to seep from his very bones. Today he wore black, the color making his pale skin seem almost translucent. He looked tired. The shadows beneath his eyes had deepened since last night. "The curse is killing him too," she thought again. "How long does he have?" One of the advisors, a gray-bearded man with the look of someone who'd seen too many negotiations go sour, cleared his throat. "The contract has been prepared according to His Majesty's specifications," he said, "if you'll permit me to summarize the key terms." "That won't be necessary." Theron picked up the document, scanned it briefly, and slid it across the table toward Narissa. "The terms are simple. I will never pressure you for affection beyond what is necessary to produce an heir. You will never be required to love me or pretend to love me. We will live separate lives in all ways that matter. In exchange, you will have my protection, my name, and all the privileges that come with being queen." His voice was flat, businesslike, as if he were negotiating a trade agreement rather than a marriage. Narissa reached for the document, but before she could take it, Odessa spoke. "Your Majesty, I must protest." Every head turned toward her. Odessa smiled, that familiar sweet smile that meant poison was coming. "I'm only thinking of your welfare, of course," she continued. "But you should know what you're getting. My stepdaughter is not merely hollowed. She's unstable, prone to fits of temper. There were incidents before she lost her wolf. Violent incidents. I hate to speak ill of family, but—" "You're not speaking ill of family." Theron's voice cut through her words like a blade through silk. "You're speaking ill of my future queen. And you will stop." Odessa's smile faltered. "Your Majesty, I only meant—" "I heard what you meant." Theron held her stare, his wolf gold focus unwavering. "And I find myself entirely uninterested in your opinions about my bride's character. You're here to sign a document, Lady Vane, nothing more." The silence that followed was absolute. Narissa stared at Theron, something warm and unfamiliar blooming in her chest. He'd defended her. The cursed king, the man who claimed he would never care for her, had just silenced her stepmother's cruelty with a single sentence. Why? She wanted to ask. Why bother? But she knew better than to question him in front of witnesses. Odessa's face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. Her hands trembled as she reached for the quill. For the first time in 3 years, Narissa saw her stepmother truly rattled. It was deeply satisfying. The contract was signed. Narissa's hand trembled only slightly as she added her name beneath Theron's sharp, precise signature. The advisors signed as witnesses. And then, almost as an afterthought, Odessa scratched her name at the bottom. Her usual elegant script reduced to a jagged scrawl. "It's done?" the gray-bearded advisor said. "The wedding will proceed as planned." Narissa looked down at the parchment, at the words that would change her life forever. She was going to be queen. She was going to marry the most feared alpha in the 5 kingdoms. She was going to share his name and his castle and, possibly, eventually, his bed. And she felt nothing. Or rather, she felt everything. but it was all so overwhelming that it canceled itself out, leaving her numb. Theron stood, signaling the end of the meeting. The advisors gathered their documents and shuffled out. But Odessa lingered, her eyes fixed on Narissa with an expression that made her blood run cold. "A word with my stepdaughter," Odessa said sweetly. "If His Majesty permits. Family matters to discuss before the wedding." Theron hesitated, glancing at Narissa. Something passed between them, some unspoken question. She nodded slightly, not trusting her voice. 5 minutes, Theron said. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Odessa moved immediately, crossing the distance between them with quick, sharp steps. Her hand closed around Narissa's wrist, gripped tight enough to bruise. "You think you've won," she hissed, her sweet facade crumbling into naked hatred. "You think you've escaped, but you haven't. You're still the same hollowed little nothing you've always been." Narissa yanked her arm free. "I'm going to be queen. You're going to be dead." Odessa's eyes glittered. "Do you really think his curse won't affect you? Do you really think being hollowed makes you immune? You stupid girl. The curse doesn't just kill the wolf. It kills everything. The soul, the heart, the mind. Every Omega he's touched has felt it, whether they had wolves or not. You'll be no different." "You're lying." "Am I?" Odessa smiled, and it was the cruelest expression Narissa had ever seen. "Ask him about Callista. Ask him about the Omega he actually loved years ago, before the curse fully manifested. Ask him what happened to her when he tried to save her. The whole court knows the story." The name hit Narissa like a blow. Callista. She'd never heard it before, but the way Odessa said it, like a weapon, like a secret she'd been saving, made Narissa's stomach twist. "The curse didn't kill her wolf," Odessa continued, leaning closer. "It killed her soul. Drove her mad. She threw herself from the North Tower rather than spend another moment feeling his love rot her from the inside out." "You're lying," Narissa repeated, but her voice shook. "Ask him." Odessa straightened, adjusting her gown with delicate precision. "Ask your precious king about the woman he destroyed, and then ask yourself what makes you think you'll be any different." She swept toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "I'll see you at the wedding, stepdaughter. I want to watch your face when you realize what you've agreed to." Then she was gone. Narissa stood alone in the council chamber, her heart pounding, her mind racing. The contract lay on the table, her signature still drying. Callista, a woman Theron had loved, a woman who had gone mad, a woman who had chosen death over his touch. Is that what waited for her? Not death by withering, but death by madness? She pressed her hand against her chest, remembering that strange flutter she'd felt last night when Theron touched her. That moment of connection, that inexplicable heat. What if it wasn't warmth at all? What if it was the curse beginning to take hold? What if she was already starting to lose her mind? The door opened and Theron stepped inside. His honeyed gaze swept the room, finding her standing frozen by the table. "Your stepmother left in quite a hurry," he said. "What did she say to you?" Narissa opened her mouth to tell him, to ask about Callista, to demand the truth. But something stopped her. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the part of her that had learned long ago not to show weakness. Or maybe it was simply the memory of how he'd defended her, sharp and certain, without hesitation. He'd given her more kindness in 10 minutes than Odessa had given her in 10 years. If he was hiding something terrible, she would find out in her own time, on her own terms. "Nothing important," she said. "Just family business." Theron studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling sense that he knew she was lying. But he didn't push. "The wedding preparations begin tomorrow," he said finally. "Try to rest. The next few days will be demanding." He turned to leave, and Narissa called out before she could stop herself. "Your Majesty." He paused. not quite turning. The curse, she said carefully. Does it only affect Omegas who bond with you, or does it affect everyone you touch? A long silence. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the castle, a clock chimed the hour. When Theron finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. It affects everyone, he said. But it kills slowest when there's nothing to feed on. Your hollowed heart might be the only thing that saves you. He left without another word. Narissa stood in the empty chamber, Odessa's warning echoing in her mind. The curse doesn't just kill the wolf, it kills everything. And as she looked down at her hands, at the fingers that had touched his and felt that strange, impossible heat, she wondered if her stepmother had been right. Maybe she wasn't escaping anything at all. Maybe she was walking straight into her own grave. The Cathedral of Valdren was ancient, its stone walls blackened by centuries of candle smoke and prayers. Massive stained glass windows depicted the old gods, their faces stern and watchful, and their eyes following every soul who passed beneath them. Narissa stood at the entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. The gown Viveka had chosen was white as fresh snow, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like captured starlight. A veil covered her face, thin enough to see through, but thick enough to blur the details of her features. You look beautiful, Your Majesty, Viveka murmured, adjusting the fall of the fabric. Truly beautiful. Narissa almost laughed. She was a hollowed Omega in borrowed finery, about to marry a cursed king who had chosen her specifically because she was already broken. There was nothing beautiful about any of it. But she kept silent and stepped through the doors. The cathedral was packed. Every noble family in the 5 kingdoms had sent representatives, eager to witness the impossible, the Alpha King taking a mate. Whispers erupted the moment she appeared, rippling through the crowd like wind through dead leaves. Is that her? The hollowed one? I heard she hasn't shifted in 3 years. Why would he choose something so damaged? Narissa kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, where the altar waited. Where he waited. Theron stood perfectly still, dressed in black as always, his pale hair pulled back from his face. The frost radiating from him was visible today, a faint shimmer in the air around his body like heat haze, in reverse. Crystalline patterns crawled along the altar stone where his hands rested. He's getting worse, Narissa realized. The curse is accelerating. She walked toward him alone. No father to escort her. No family to witness her joy. Just the weight of 1,000 staring eyes and the growing certainty that she was making either the best decision of her life or the worst. The priest began the ceremony, his voice echoing through the vaulted space. Ancient words, sacred vows, promises that had bound wolves together for millennia. Narissa barely heard any of it. She was too aware of Theron beside her, of the chill emanating from his body, of the way his jaw clenched whenever the priest mentioned love or devotion or forever. Do you, Theron Voss, Alpha King of Valdren, take this woman as your mate, your queen, your bond? I do. His voice was steady, empty, a formality. The priest turned to her. And do you, Narissa Vane, take this man as your mate, your king, your bond? Narissa hesitated, not from doubt, but from something else. Some instinct screaming at her to pay attention, to notice what was happening beneath the surface. Theron's hands were shaking, barely visible, just a faint tremor, but real. And his scent, that winter smell that surrounded him constantly, had shifted. There was something beneath it now, something almost heated. Fear, she realized. He's afraid. The Alpha King of Valdren, the most powerful wolf in the 5 kingdoms, was terrified. Of her? Of the ceremony? Of what came after? I do, she said softly. The priest smiled. Then, by the power of the old gods and the new, I pronounce you bound. You may claim your mate. The traditional claiming required a bite, a mark on the neck that would bind their wolves together for eternity. But Narissa had no wolf, and Theron. Theron leaned close, his lips brushing her ear. "I won't mark you," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. "Not without your wolf to receive it. It would be meaningless, cruel." Another kindness, another consideration she hadn't expected. "Then what do we do?" she whispered back. In answer, Theron took her hand. His fingers were ice against her skin, so cold it almost burned. But instead of pulling away, he lifted her palm to his lips and pressed a kiss against her racing pulse. The crowd murmured in confusion. This wasn't tradition. This wasn't proper. But Narissa understood. He was making his own tradition. One that didn't require her to pretend she was whole when she wasn't. One that acknowledged what they both were. Broken things trying to survive. "Thank you," she breathed. Their gazes locked, and for just a moment, something flickered in the depths of his eyes. Something that wasn't cold at all. Then he released her hand and turned to face the crowd, and the moment was gone. The wedding feast was torture. Narissa sat beside Theron at the high table, accepting congratulations from nobles who looked at her with barely concealed pity or suspicion. The food was exquisite, course after course of delicacies she couldn't taste. The music was beautiful, played by the finest musicians in the kingdom, but all she could focus on was him. Theron ate nothing, drank nothing. He sat rigid in his chair, responding to well-wishers with monosyllabic courtesy, his hands hidden beneath the table where no one could see them shake. The chill around him was intensifying. Narissa could feel it even through her gown, a creeping frost that seeped into her bones. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, leaning toward him. "You're unwell." "I'm fine." "You're freezing the tablecloth." He glanced down. She was right. Ice had spread from where his fingers gripped the linen, crystalline patterns reaching toward the centerpiece like grasping hands. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite embarrassment, but close. "It happens when I'm—" He stopped, swallowed. "It's nothing, I'll control it." "When you're what?" He didn't answer, but he also didn't pull away when Narissa reached beneath the table and covered his frozen hand with her own. The cold was shocking, painful. Her fingers went numb almost immediately. But she didn't let go. Theron stared at her, something unreadable in his wolf-gold eyes. "You should stop," he said roughly. "The cold can damage—" "I'm already damaged." She met his gaze steadily. "A little more won't matter." For a long moment neither of them moved. The music played. The nobles laughed and drank. And beneath the table, hidden from everyone, the Alpha King held his hollow queen's hand, like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. Later that night, Narissa waited in her chambers, the wedding night, the consummation, the moment she'd been dreading since she signed the contract. She wore a nightgown of thin white silk, beautiful and impractical, designed for a bride who expected to be desired. The fire in the hearth blazed high, but she was still cold, his cold. It had seeped into her during the feast and hadn't left. The knock came just after midnight. "Come in," she managed. Theron entered slowly, closing the door behind him with careful precision. He'd removed his formal jacket, leaving only a white shirt that hung loose on his frame. In the firelight, he looked almost human, almost warm. Almost. "We don't have to do this tonight," he said quietly. "The contract requires an heir, but there's no timeline. If you're not ready—" "Are you?" The question seemed to startle him. "What?" "Are you ready?" Narissa stood, facing him across the candlelit room. "You've spent so long protecting everyone from your curse. Every Omega who's gotten close to you has suffered. So I'm asking you, Your Majesty, are you ready to risk that again?" Theron was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled. Shadows danced across his sharp features. "I've thought about this," he said finally. "Extensively. You have no wolf for the curse to attack. You're already hollow. In theory, there's nothing for the withering to feed on." "In theory?" "Yes." He met her eyes. "In theory. And if you're wrong? Then I'll bear the weight of another death on my conscience." His voice was steady, but she heard the crack beneath it. "I'm already carrying so many. What's one more?" The words should have been callous. Instead, they sounded exhausted, hopeless, like a man who had given up expecting anything good. Narissa crossed the room. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough to feel the frost radiating from his skin, close enough to see the subtle lines of strain around his eyes. "What if there's another possibility?" she asked softly. "What if the theory is right, and I survive? What then?" "Then we'll have an heir. The succession will be secured, and we'll continue as we agreed. Separate lives. No attachment. Is that what you want?" The question hung between them. Theron's jaw tightened. "What I want," he said slowly, "stopped mattering a long time ago." He reached out, and his icy fingers brushed her cheek. The touch was feather-light, careful, as if he was afraid she might shatter. "You're warm," he murmured, almost to himself. "How are you still warm?" "I don't know. You should be frozen by now. Everyone else is frozen within minutes of being this close to me. Maybe I'm different. Maybe." His thumb traced along her cheekbone, leaving trails of frost that melted almost instantly against her skin. "Or maybe you're just better at hiding how much it hurts." Narissa caught his wrist, holding his hand against her face. His skin burned with cold, but she didn't flinch. "It doesn't hurt," she said. "It feels like waking up. Like something that was numb is starting to feel again." Theron went very still. "That's not possible," he whispered. "The cold doesn't heal. It only destroys." "Then explain this." She pressed his palm flat against her chest, just above her heart. The place where her wolf had once lived. The hollow space that had been empty for 3 years. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Theron's eyes widened. "There's something there," he breathed. "Beneath the emptiness. I can feel it. Faint, but..." He looked at her with something like wonder. "How is this possible?" Narissa had no answer. She only knew that when he touched her, when his frozen fingers pressed against her hollow heart, she felt less empty than she had in years. "Stay," she heard herself say. "Tonight. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the curse does or doesn't do. Stay with me tonight." Theron's expression was unreadable. His hand trembled against her chest. Then, slowly, carefully, as if handling something infinitely fragile, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was ice and fire. Cold that burned. Warmth that froze. Narissa gasped against his mouth, and he swallowed the sound, his hands coming up to cup her face, his body pressing close despite the chill that surrounded him. She had expected nothing. She felt everything. And when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theron looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "What are you?" he asked hoarsely. Narissa had no answer. But as he carried her to the bed, as the candles guttered and died, as the darkness wrapped around them both, she felt something impossible happening. In the hollow space where her wolf had died, something stirred. The morning after her wedding night, Narissa woke alone. She reached across the bed, but the sheets were cold. Not his cold, the supernatural chill that radiated from his curse. Just ordinary cold. The cold of absence. He'd left sometime in the night. After everything they'd shared. After the way he'd touched her like she was precious. After the impossible warmth that had bloomed between them despite his curse. He'd left without a word. Narissa pressed her hand against her chest, feeling for that strange stirring she'd noticed last night. Was it still there? Had she imagined it? No. There it was. Faint as a distant heartbeat, but real. Something lived in the hollow space inside her. Something that had been sleeping for 3 years. Her wolf? Impossible. Her wolf was dead. Everyone said so. The healers, the priests, her stepmother. Odessa had been there the night it happened, had watched Narissa collapse and convulse, and had pronounced the death of her wolf spirit with tears in her eyes. But what if they were all wrong? What if Odessa had lied? Before she could pursue the thought, Vivica entered with a breakfast tray and a knowing smile. "Good morning, Your Majesty. I trust you slept well?" Narissa felt heat rush to her cheeks. Yes. Thank you." His Majesty left early for council meetings. Viveca set the tray on the bedside table. "But he asked me to give you this." She handed Narissa a small velvet box. Inside, nestled against black silk, lay a ring. Not the wedding band she already wore, but something different. A delicate band of silver set with a single white stone that seemed to glow from within. "It's a moonstone," Viveca said quietly. "Very rare. They say it can reveal hidden truths." Narissa slipped it onto her finger. The stone was cool against her skin, but not cold. Not like him. "Why would he give me this?" "Perhaps you should ask him yourself, Your Majesty." Vivica's eyes twinkled. "He'll be taking dinner in his private study tonight. Alone. Unless someone were to join him." A hint. A door left open. Narissa spent the day exploring the castle, mapping its endless corridors and empty rooms. The place was vast and hollow, much like herself. But where she was hollow from loss, the castle felt hollow from neglect, as if everyone who had once lived here had slowly drained away, leaving only echoes behind. She found the library, dusty and magnificent, its shelves stuffed with books that hadn't been touched in years. She found the music room, its instruments covered with white sheets like sleeping ghosts. She found the portrait gallery, where generations of Voss kings stared down from gilded frames with golden eyes. They all had his eyes, that same wolf-gold stare. But none of them looked as haunted as Theron did. At the end of the gallery hung a painting that stopped her cold. It was a woman, young, beautiful, with dark hair cascading over bare shoulders and a smile that radiated warmth even through centuries-old pigment. She wore a white gown, and around her throat hung a moonstone pendant identical to the ring Narissa now wore. A small plaque beneath the painting read, "Callista Voss, beloved queen, taken too soon." Narissa's blood ran cold. Callista. The name Odessa had thrown at her like a weapon. The Omega Theron had loved, the one who had thrown herself from the North Tower. But this painting showed no madness, no despair. Only a woman who looked utterly, completely happy. "What happened to you?" Narissa wondered. "What did his love do to you?" That evening, she knocked on the door to Theron's private study. "Enter." He sat behind a massive desk, surrounded by papers and maps, the fire burning high in the hearth. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise? Relief? She couldn't tell. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure I was invited." "You're always invited." He gestured to the chair across from him. "You're my wife." The word felt strange on his lips. Foreign. Like he was still getting used to the shape of it. Narissa sat. The fire warmed her back, but it couldn't touch the chill that radiated from Theron's side of the room. Frost had crept up the legs of his desk, crystalline patterns spreading across the wood like winter on a window. "It's getting worse," she said. "Your curse." "Yes." "Because of last night?" Theron set down his quill and met her eyes. In the firelight, his gaze looked almost copper. "The curse feeds on connection," he said carefully. "Any connection, physical, emotional. The more I feel, the stronger it becomes." So last night made it worse. Last night made it much worse. The words should have been an accusation. Instead, they sounded almost grateful. I would do it again, Theron continued quietly, every frozen inch of it. I would do it 1,000 times. Narissa's heart stuttered. Why? Because for the first time in 10 years, I felt something that wasn't cold. He looked at her with an intensity that took her breath away. You did that. I don't understand how, but you did. The thing inside me, Narissa said slowly. The presence awakening. You felt it too, didn't you? Yes. What is it? I don't know. But it responds to the curse. When the cold reaches for you, it pushes back, like a fire that refuses to be extinguished. A fire. In the hollow space where her wolf had died. I saw the portrait, Narissa said. In the gallery. Callista. Theron went very still. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. My stepmother told me about her, Narissa continued. She said everyone at court knows the story, that you loved her, that the curse drove her mad. She faltered. She said Callista killed herself rather than feel your love rotting her from the inside. For a long moment, Theron said nothing. The fire crackled. Frost crept further up the desk legs. Then, finally, he spoke. Callista was my mate, he said. My true mate. Fated by the gods, bound by blood and soul. We met when I was 19. She was 17. We fell in love within a week. His voice was flat, reciting facts, but his hands were shaking. The curse hadn't fully manifested then. I knew I was cold, colder than normal, but I didn't understand what it meant. Neither did she. We were married within the month. We were happy. So happy. He paused, and when he continued, his voice had roughened. The withering started on our wedding night. She woke up the next morning and couldn't feel her wolf. Within a week, she couldn't shift. Within a month, she couldn't feel anything at all. The curse had eaten everything warm inside her, everything that made her herself. Theron. She threw herself from the North Tower on our anniversary. He met her eyes, and she saw something in them that looked like shattered glass. She left a note. It said she'd rather die than live another day feeling nothing. She said the emptiness was worse than any physical pain. She said... He stopped, swallowed hard. She said she still loved me, even at the end. Even when there was nothing left of her to love with. Narissa's chest ached, not the pleasant stirring she'd felt before, but something deeper. Something that felt like his pain echoing inside her hollow spaces. That's why you chose me, she whispered. Because I'm already empty, already hollowed. You thought there was nothing left for the curse to take. Yes. But you were wrong, weren't you? Theron looked at her, and for the first time she saw fear in his wolf gold eyes. Real fear. There's something inside you, Narissa. Something that should have died 3 years ago but didn't, and my curse is waking it up. Is that bad? I don't know. His voice cracked. I don't know anything anymore. All I know is that when I'm with you, I feel less cold. And that terrifies me more than anything else ever has. Narissa rose from her chair. She crossed to his side of the desk, ignoring the ice that crackled beneath her feet, ignoring the chill that bit at her skin. She took his frozen hand in hers. Then, let's be terrified together, she said. Theron stared at her. Then, slowly, carefully, he lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss against her knuckles. The frost on the desk began to melt. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Narissa had ever experienced. Theron came to her chambers every night, not always for physical intimacy, though that happened too, with increasing frequency and intensity. Sometimes they simply talked, sharing pieces of themselves they'd never shared with anyone. He told her about his childhood, about the father who had grown colder each year until he'd frozen solid on his throne, about the mother who had fled rather than watch her mate die. She told him about her real mother, the gentle Omega who had died when Narissa was 6, about Odessa and her cruelties, about the night her wolf had supposedly died. "Tell me about that night," he said once, his body curled around hers in the darkness. What actually happened? Narissa hesitated. The memories were fragmented, full of gaps and shadows. "I was 20, she said slowly. Odessa had arranged a betrothal for Marceline to a wealthy alpha. There was a celebration. I wasn't invited, but I watched from the servants' corridor. What happened then? I don't remember. I was watching Marceline dance, and then nothing. I woke up 3 days later. The healer said my wolf was dead. Odessa said I'd collapsed during a shift, that my wolf spirit had simply given up." Given up? That's what she told everyone. That I was always weak, that it was only a matter of time. Theron's arms tightened around her. "Wolves don't just give up. Not without cause." "I know. Something else happened that night. Something you don't remember." "I know that too." She pressed closer to his cold body, drawing comfort from his presence despite the chill. "But I've never been able to find out what." Theron was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We'll find out. Together." And she believed him. As the weeks passed, Narissa noticed changes in herself, in him, in the castle that had seemed so dead when she arrived. The ember in her chest grew stronger. Not a wolf, not quite, but something adjacent. Something that purred when Theron touched her and snarled when she thought of Odessa. Something that was slowly, impossibly coming back to life. And Theron was changing too. The frost that had surrounded him was receding. He laughed now, sometimes, a rusty sound like he'd forgotten how. He sought her out during the day, not just at night. He asked her opinions on matters of state and actually listened to her answers. "You're getting warmer," she told him one evening, her hand pressed against his chest. "Your heartbeat is faster. Your skin is almost normal." "You're healing me," he said wonderingly. "I don't know how, but you are. Maybe we're healing each other." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and when they made love that night, it was different, more intense, more connected. Like something was clicking into place between them, some bond forming despite all their efforts to prevent it. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Narissa gathered her courage. "I'm pregnant," she said. Theron's hand flew to her stomach. "You're certain?" "The healer confirmed it this morning." For a moment he said nothing. Then he pulled her close, so close she could feel his heart hammering against her back. "A child," he breathed. "Our child." The joy in his voice made her heart soar. But beneath the joy was terror, because she knew what she felt for him now. Knew it with absolute certainty. She loved him. Against all odds, against all reason, she loved this cursed, frozen, broken king. And if Callista's story was any indication, that love would destroy them both. The months that followed were the happiest of Narissa's life. Her belly grew round with their child. Theron became devoted, almost obsessive in his care for her. He dismissed council meetings to bring her breakfast in bed. He read to her every night, his hand resting on her stomach, waiting for the baby to kick. He smiled more than she'd ever seen him smile, and each smile was like watching the sun break through winter clouds. The presence inside her had become a constant companion. Not quite a wolf, but something similar. Something that responded to the child growing in her womb, that wrapped around the tiny life like a protective flame. "It's getting stronger," the healer told her during an examination. "Whatever this is inside you, it's not dead. It's been sleeping, growing, waiting." "Waiting for what?" The healer shook her head. "I don't know, Your Majesty, but I've never seen anything like it." Neither had Narissa, and neither, it seemed, had Theron. His curse was retreating. Not gone, not completely, but diminished. The ice that had once spread from his touch now barely extended beyond his fingertips. His skin held warmth for hours after they were together. His eyes had lost that hollow, frozen look. "You've done the impossible," his chief advisor said during a council meeting. "The curse is fading. The king is healing. After 10 years of watching him freeze from the inside out, you've brought him back." Narissa should have been happy. She was happy. But beneath the happiness lurked a growing fear, because she'd noticed something else changing too. Theron looked at her differently now. His gaze followed her constantly, hungry and possessive. His touch lingered longer than necessary. And his scent, that winter smell that had always surrounded him, was shifting, becoming warmer, becoming almost claiming. He was falling in love with her, and every time she saw that soft, wondering expression on his face, she remembered Callista, remembered what his love had done to his true mate, remembered that the curse didn't just feed on love received, it fed on love given. The night it happened began like any other. They'd just finished dinner in his study, talking about names for the baby. He wanted to name a son after his grandfather, the last king who had ruled before the curse fully manifested. She wanted something new, something that represented hope rather than history. "What about Lysander?" she suggested. "It means liberator, the one who sets things free." Theron smiled, that soft, devastating smile that made her heart ache. "Lysander Voss. I like it." He reached across the table and took her hand. His skin was warm. Actually warm. For the first time since she'd known him, he felt almost normal. "Narissa," he said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" "I've been trying to fight this." His golden gaze searched her face. "I swore I would never let it happen again. After Callista, I promised myself I would never feel anything for anyone. It was the only way to keep people safe." "Theron? But you—" He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles. "You've made it impossible. Every day, every moment, every time you look at me like I'm not a monster, like I'm just a man, I feel myself falling further." "No, no, no, no. You don't have to say this," Narissa said desperately. "You don't have to feel anything. We agreed. The contract means nothing." His voice was rough. "It meant nothing the moment I kissed you. Maybe it meant nothing from the very beginning. From the moment I saw you standing on that platform, hollow and alone, and still somehow magnificent. Please stop. I can't." His grip on her hand tightened. "I've tried. Gods know I've tried. But I love you, Narissa. I love you in a way I didn't know I was still capable of loving anyone. And I know it's dangerous. I know what happened to Callista, but I can't—" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes went wide. His hand flew to his chest. "Theron." Narissa was on her feet instantly. "Theron, what's wrong?" He tried to speak, but no words came out. His face had gone pale, paler than she'd ever seen it, white as fresh snow. Frost erupted from his skin, spreading across the table, crawling up his arms, crystallizing in his hair. The curse was back, and it was 100 times worse than before. "No," Narissa gasped. "No, this can't. Theron." He collapsed. She caught him before he hit the ground, her arms wrapped around his frozen body. He was convulsing, shaking, his eyes rolled back in his head as ice spread across his chest like a living thing. "Help!" she screamed. "Someone help me!" Guards burst through the door. Healers were summoned. Chaos erupted around them, but Narissa didn't move. She held him, her husband, her king, the father of her child, and she watched the curse consume him. This is my fault, she thought numbly. He loved me, and now he's dying. It's no use, Theron whispered. His eyes had opened, unfocused and dim with pain. There's no cure. There never was. Don't say that. Tears streamed down her face. Don't you dare say that? I knew what would happen if I let myself love you. His fingers intertwined with hers, so cold it burned. I just couldn't stop. Then stop now. Stop loving me. Please, Theron, just... I can't. He smiled, a terrible, beautiful smile. I don't want to. The frost had reached his face now. Ice crystals formed on his eyelashes, his lips, spreading toward his eyes. You made me feel alive again, he breathed. For the first time in 10 years, I was warm. That's worth everything. It's not worth your life. It's worth mine. His eyes found hers, still lucid despite the curse ravaging his body. The question is it worth yours? Narissa's blood went cold. What do you mean? The curse feeds on love. His voice was fading. Mine for you, but also yours for me. No, you love me, Theron whispered. I can feel it. I've felt it for weeks. And the curse wants it. It's reaching for you even now, reaching for the fire inside you. The thing within her convulsed. Not the pleasant warmth she'd grown used to, but something violent, something that felt like claws. If I die, Theron continued, the curse dies with me, but if I live, if you somehow save me, it will bind to you, forever. And I won't let that happen. Theron, don't. Promise me. His grip on her hand tightened, frost burning into her skin. Promise me you won't try to save me. Promise me you'll let me go. I can't. Narissa, I love you. The words tore out of her, raw and desperate. I love you, and I won't watch you die, and I don't care what the curse does to me because a world without you isn't worth living in anyway. Theron stared at her, and then his eyes closed, and his hand went limp in hers, and the Alpha King of Veldrin stopped breathing. 3 days had passed since Theron collapsed. 3 days of Narissa sitting vigil beside his frozen body, watching the ice spread inch by inch across his skin. 3 days of healers shaking their heads and advisors whispering about succession and servants tiptoeing past her door like she was already a widow. He wasn't dead. Not yet. His heart still beat, faint and slow, a rhythm she could only hear when she pressed her ear directly against his frozen chest. But he wasn't alive either. He existed somewhere in between, trapped in a prison of frost that grew thicker with each passing hour. The baby kicked against her ribs, restless and afraid. Narissa pressed her hand against her swollen belly, trying to offer comfort she didn't feel. I won't let him die, she whispered. I swear to you, little one, I won't let your father die. But she had no idea how to save him. The curse was ancient, powerful. It had claimed every Omega who'd ever loved Theron, had driven his own mother to flee, rather than watch her mate freeze to death. What could a hollowed Omega do against something like that? Except she wasn't hollowed anymore. Not completely. The presence in her chest had grown violent since Theron's collapse. It thrashed against her ribs like a caged beast, desperate to break free. Something was alive inside her, something that had been sleeping for 3 years and was now screaming to wake up. But what was it? And why had it been sleeping in the first place? I need answers, Narissa said to the empty room. I need to know what happened to me. The door opened behind her. Vivica entered, her kind face drawn with worry. Your Majesty, there's a visitor. She insisted on seeing you immediately. Who? Your stepmother. Your Majesty. Lady Vane. Narissa's blood ran cold. Send her away. She says she has information about the curse, about how to save the king. Every instinct screamed at Narissa to refuse. Odessa was poison. Odessa was lies. Odessa had spent 3 years torturing her, had sent her to the claiming trials hoping she'd be sold into slavery. But if there was even a chance she knew something useful. "Send her in," Narissa said. Odessa swept into the room like she owned it, her silk gown rustling, her face arranged in an expression of maternal concern that made Narissa want to vomit. "My poor dear," Odessa cooed. "Look at you, sitting here day and night, destroying yourself over a man who was always going to die anyway. If you've come to gloat, I've come to help." Odessa's eyes glittered. "Believe it or not, I don't want the Alpha King dead. His death would create chaos. War, possibly. That's bad for everyone, including me." Narissa studied her stepmother's face, searching for the lie. "You said you had information." "I do." Odessa sat in the chair across from her, crossing her legs with elegant precision. "I know what the curse really is, and I know how to break it. Tell me. First, tell me something." Odessa leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Narissa's face. "That fire inside you, the thing that's been growing since you arrived here. You feel it, don't you?" Narissa went very still. "How do you know about that?" "Because I put it there." Odessa smiled, and it was the cruelest expression Narissa had ever seen. "Or rather, I put it to sleep, 3 years ago, the night of Marceline's betrothal celebration." The room tilted. Narissa gripped the arm of her chair. "What are you talking about?" "Your wolf, dear. It didn't die. Wolves don't just die without cause. Surely you've figured that out by now." "Then what?" "I suppressed it." Odessa's voice was casual, like she was discussing the weather. "A complicated bit of magic? Very expensive, very illegal, but worth every coin." Narissa couldn't breathe. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because your wolf was special." Odessa stood, beginning to pace. "Your mother knew it. Phoenix wolves show signs from birth. A warmth that never fades. A spark behind the eyes. Your mother recognized them when you were barely walking. A phoenix wolf, they call it. Incredibly rare. Perhaps one born every 1,000 years. Phoenix wolf." The words echoed in Narissa's mind. "Phoenix wolves have a unique gift," Odessa continued. "They can burn away curses, diseases, dark magic. Anything that shouldn't exist, a phoenix wolf can consume it in flame and be reborn from the ashes." The presence in Narissa's chest surged, as if responding to its name. "If anyone had discovered what you were, you'd have been taken to the royal court, trained, treasured. You'd have been more valuable than any princess, any noble bloodline." Odessa's voice turned bitter. "And your father would have looked at you instead of Marceline, would have loved you instead of her. I couldn't allow that." "So you killed my wolf." "I suppressed it. There's a difference." Odessa waved a dismissive hand. "I hired a witch to bind your phoenix spirit, to put it into a sleep so deep it would seem like death. Everyone believed you were hollowed. Even you believed it. And with you, broken and disgraced, Marceline could shine." Narissa's hands were shaking, with rage, with horror, with something that felt like burning. 3 years, she breathed. 3 years you let me believe I was dead inside. 3 years you let me be called an abomination, let me be sold at the claiming trials like livestock. And yet here you are." Odessa's eyes gleamed. "Queen. Pregnant with the royal heir. Your phoenix wolf awakening despite my best efforts." She laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "I underestimated you, stepdaughter. I won't make that mistake again. You said you knew how to break the curse. I do. Your phoenix wolf can burn it away. But there's a catch." Odessa's smile widened. "The binding I placed on your wolf is still active. Weakened, but active. To fully awaken your phoenix spirit, you need the binding stone, the object that holds the spell in place." "Where is it?" "With me," Safely hidden. Odessa spread her hands. And I'm willing to give it to you. For a price. Of course. There was always a price with Odessa. What do you want? Marceline's future secured. I want her married to a prince, a duke, someone worthy of her beauty. I want her established at court with a title and lands of her own. And I want a royal pardon for my involvement in suppressing your wolf. A pardon? Narissa stood, her voice rising. You tortured me for 3 years. You made me believe I was broken. You're the reason I... She stopped, a horrible realization dawning. You're the reason the curse is killing him. Odessa blinked. Excuse me? The curse feeds on connection, on love. If my wolf had been awake, if I'd been whole, it could have protected both of us from the beginning. The curse never would have taken hold. But because you suppressed my phoenix spirit, there was nothing to stop it. Narissa advanced on her stepmother, something hot and dangerous building in her chest. Theron is dying because of you. For the first time, Odessa looked uncertain. That's not... I couldn't have known. Give me the binding stone. Not until you agree to my terms. Give it to me. The words came out as a roar, and with them came fire. Flames erupted from Narissa's hands, spiraling up her arms, wreathing her body in golden light. The presence in her chest exploded into a howl, her wolf surging against the weakened binding, straining toward freedom. Odessa screamed, stumbling backward. What are you? I'm what you tried to destroy. Narissa's voice resonated with power, 2 voices layered over each other, her own and something older, something ancient. I'm what you could never control. Now give me the stone, or I'll burn it out of you. I don't have it, Odessa shrieked. I gave it to Marceline for safekeeping. She doesn't even know what it is. The flames flickered. The wolf inside Narissa howled with frustration, straining against chains that still held. Where is she? The East Wing. The guest chambers. Please, Narissa. I never meant for any of this to... Narissa didn't wait to hear the rest. She ran. The guest chambers were on the opposite side of the castle, a distance that felt like miles with her heavy belly and her wolf thrashing inside her. Servants scattered as she passed, staring at the flames that still licked along her skin, at the golden light that poured from her eyes. She burst through Marceline's door without knocking. Her stepsister stood by the window dressed in traveling clothes. A packed trunk sat at her feet. She'd been preparing to flee. Narissa, Marceline gasped. What? What's happening to you? The binding stone. Where is it? I don't know what you're... Don't lie to me. Narissa advanced, flames dancing at her fingertips. Your mother told me everything. She suppressed my wolf. She made me believe I was hollowed. And she gave you the stone that holds the binding in place. Marceline's face crumpled. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what it was. Mother gave it to me years ago, said it was a family heirloom, said I should keep it safe. Give it to me. Narissa, please. I never wanted any of this. I never wanted you hurt. Mother said you were dangerous, said your wolf was diseased, said binding it was for your own good. She lied, like she always lies. Narissa's voice broke. The king is dying, Marceline. The man I love is frozen solid because your mother crippled me before I could save him. So give me the stone, or watch me burn this castle down trying to find it. Marceline stared at her for a long moment. Tears streamed down her face. Then she reached into her bodice and withdrew a small black crystal on a silver chain. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, sister. I should have questioned her. I should have protected you. I was a coward, and you paid the price. She pressed the stone into Narissa's hand. The moment the crystal touched her skin, Narissa felt the binding shatter. It was like breaking through ice into sunlight, like drawing breath after drowning. Her wolf exploded inside her, not awakening but resurrecting, a phoenix rising from ashes 3 years cold. Fire consumed her. Golden flames poured from every inch of her body, spiraling toward the ceiling, filling the room with heat and light. She heard Marceline scream, heard servants shouting, and heard the distant crash of glass as windows shattered from the force of her awakening. But beneath all of it, she heard something else. A heartbeat. Faint, but steady. Growing stronger. Theron. Narissa ran. The king's chambers were encased in ice. Frost covered every surface, the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Icicles hung from the bed canopy like frozen tears, and at the center of it all lay Theron, his body barely visible beneath layers of crystalline ice. Narissa crashed through the door, her phoenix wolf blazing. The cold hit her like a physical force, trying to push her back, trying to freeze the flames that wreathed her body. The curse recognized her, recognized what she was, and it was afraid. Good, she thought savagely. It should be. She crossed to the bed, ice melting beneath her feet with every step. The closer she got to Theron, the more violently her flames burned, golden fire meeting ancient cold in a battle that shook the very foundations of the castle. "I'm here," she said, her voice resonating with power. "I'm here, and I'm not letting you go." She pressed her burning hands against his frozen chest. The curse screamed. She felt it, actually felt it, a living thing made of hatred and cold and centuries of accumulated pain. It had been placed on Theron's bloodline by a witch who had been wronged, a curse born of heartbreak and revenge. It had fed on every king since, growing stronger with each generation, each frozen heart, each omega driven to madness or death. And now it faced something it had never encountered before, a phoenix wolf, a fire that could not be extinguished, a love that burned hotter than any cold. "You can't have him," Narissa growled. "He's mine." She poured everything she had into her hands, every ounce of fire, every shred of love, every moment of pain and loneliness and desperation that had brought her to this moment. The ice began to melt, slowly at first, then faster. Water streamed from Theron's body, pooling on the floor, evaporating into steam as her flames consumed it. The curse thrashed and fought, but Narissa held on. She thought of their wedding night, of his frozen hands touching her with such gentleness. She thought of his laughter, rusty from disuse, when she'd made some silly joke. She thought of his hand on her belly, waiting for their child to kick, his golden eyes soft with wonder. She thought of him saying he loved her, knowing what it would cost him, saying it anyway. The curse shattered. It didn't fade or retreat. It shattered, breaking apart into 1,000 fragments of dark ice that dissolved in her flames. Generations of frozen pain burned away in an instant. And beneath it, finally, Theron opened his eyes. "Narissa?" His voice was hoarse, confused. His hand came up to touch her face and his skin was warm. Actually, truly warm. "What happened? Why are you on fire?" She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I'm a phoenix wolf." Surprise. "A what?" "I'll explain later." She kissed him, hard and desperate, tasting the salt of her own tears. You're alive, and the curse is broken, and I love you so much I thought I would die." "The curse is broken?" He sat up slowly, looking around the room. The ice was gone. The cold was gone. The chamber was warm and dry and filled with golden sunlight streaming through windows that hadn't been uncovered in years. How is that possible? "My wolf. It can burn away curses, it can—" She stopped, a new fear gripping her. "The baby. Theron. I used so much power. I don't know if—" She pressed her hand against her belly. A kick, strong and immediate. And beneath it, a second heartbeat she'd never noticed before. A tiny flame, burning bright and steady. "The baby is fine," she breathed. "Better than fine. I think she has my wolf. She? Don't ask me how I know. I just do. Theron pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. His heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear, no longer struggling against ice, no longer fighting to stay alive. You saved me, he murmured into her hair. You impossible, magnificent woman, you saved me. We saved each other. The weeks that followed were chaotic but joyful. Odessa was arrested for illegal use of dark magic and conspiracy against the crown. Her trial was brief. She confessed to everything, perhaps hoping for mercy. She received none. She would spend the rest of her life in a prison tower, stripped of title and lands, forgotten by the society she had worked so hard to impress. Marceline testified against her mother, providing crucial evidence about the binding stone and Odessa's years of manipulation. She wept on the stand, apologizing publicly for her silence, for believing her mother's lies, for failing to protect her stepsister. The betrothal Odessa had arranged for her had fallen through years ago, leaving Marceline with nothing but guilt and regret. Narissa offered her a place at court, a chance to start fresh. Marceline accepted, and slowly, tentatively, the sisters began to build a relationship that had never been allowed to exist. The curse's destruction rippled through the bloodline. In distant corners of the kingdom, relatives who had exhibited similar symptoms of cold and isolation reported sudden improvements. An entire generation of Voss descendants freed from a centuries-old burden. And Theron? Theron was transformed. The cold that had surrounded him for his entire adult life was gone. He ran warm now, almost hot, as if her phoenix fire had reignited something inside him that had never properly burned before. He laughed freely. He touched her constantly, as if reassuring himself she was real. He attended council meetings with genuine interest rather than cold obligation. "You've given me back my life," he told her one evening, as they walked through gardens that were finally being cleared of dead flowers and overgrown weeds. "I don't know how to thank you." "You could start by letting me choose the baby's name." He laughed, pulling her close despite her enormous belly. "I already agreed to Lysander for a boy. And if it's a girl? Then you choose." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Whatever you want. Anything. Everything. I would give you the sun itself if you asked for it." "I don't want the sun." She looked up at him, at this man who had chosen her when no one else would, who had given her safety and protection and eventually, impossibly love. "I just want you. For as long as we both live. You have me." His wolf gold eyes were warm, so warm, no trace of frost left anywhere. "Always and forever. My mate, my queen, my heart." He kissed her, soft and deep, and Narissa felt her phoenix wolf purr with contentment. The baby came on the first day of spring. Narissa labored for hours, Theron at her side the entire time, his warm hand wrapped around hers. When the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Narissa looked down at a tiny face framed by wisps of dark hair and felt her heart crack open with love. "A girl," the midwife announced, "healthy and strong, and Your Majesty." She hesitated. "Her wolf is already present. I've never seen anything like it. She's not even an hour old, and I can feel her spirit burning." "A phoenix," Narissa murmured. "Like me." Theron reached out to touch their daughter's cheek. The baby grabbed his finger, her tiny grip surprisingly strong, and opened her eyes. They were amber. His eyes. But beneath the amber, flames danced. "What will you name her?" he asked softly. Narissa had known the answer for months, had felt it settle into her bones like truth. "Saraphina," she said. "It means burning one, for the fire that saved us both." Theron smiled, that full, unreserved smile she'd come to treasure. "Saraphina Voss, Princess of Valdrin, the flame that will never go out." He leaned down and pressed a kiss to Narissa's forehead, then to Saraphina's. "My queens," he murmured. "Both of you. My everything." Years later, when historians wrote about the reign of Theron and Narissa Voss, they called it the Age of Flame. They wrote about the Alpha King who had been cursed from birth, frozen from the inside out, destined to die alone. They wrote about the hollowed Omega who had been broken and discarded, sold at auction like livestock. They wrote about the impossible love that had formed between them, the phoenix fire that had burned away centuries of darkness. They wrote about the 3 children who followed Saraphina, each one born with their mother's fire and their father's golden eyes. They wrote about the kingdom that flourished under warm rule after generations of cold, about the laws that were changed, the magical academies that were built, the alliances that were forged. But what the historians couldn't capture, what no book could ever properly convey, was the quiet moments. Theron chasing Saraphina through the garden while Narissa laughed from a bench nearby, her hand resting on her belly where their second child grew. Saraphina, at 5 years old, accidentally setting her nursery on fire during a tantrum, and then crying with relief when Narissa put it out with a wave of her own flames. Marceline standing as godmother to each of the royal children, her face soft with love for the family she had finally become part of. Theron holding Narissa at night, his body warm against hers, whispering about how he'd spent decades believing he would never know love, never know warmth, never know anything but cold and duty and the slow march toward death. "You saved me," he told her every night, like a prayer. "We saved each other," she always replied, because that was the truth of it. They had both been broken, they had both been discarded. They had both believed that love was something that happened to other people. People who weren't cursed or hollowed or damaged beyond repair. They had been wrong. Love had found them anyway, in the darkest place, at the most desperate moment, when neither of them had any hope left. And in loving each other, they had burned away not just a curse, but an entire kingdom's worth of darkness, creating space for something new to grow, something warm, something bright, something that would never, ever go out. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought. Your feedback means more than you know. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time.